Okay.
Go.
Yeah, get rid of that. Or does it
So,
do
That'll
something?
fade away in a little.
Dr. Leslie King
We hope.
is a medical doctor with environmental training, a combination she uses in service as a commissioner for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And she's also an adjunct professor at Portland State University. She's been teaching environmental justice in a number of classes. So for the Watershed Group presentation, Leslie's going to be sharing a shortened version of a lecture on environmental justice and river restoration, touching on the inequalities of many environmental improvement projects. So by examining past projects through an environmental justice lens, we can gain a deeper understanding and knowledge, and leading to a more informed and equitable future choice in the context of river restoration. We really appreciate you coming tonight, Leslie, and take it away.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. There's something in our words. Yes. Yeah, it's a good place to stand. I don't know if online people can say we're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for having me, as you heard, Dr. Leslie King. Some of you know me, have seen me live streamed on the commission meetings. So I am one of 7. I represent Portland, and for the moment, Hood River. Our districts are about to change, so you'll get, if you stage, you'll get Commissioner Laphart, which I know Alex and Cindy had met. And before I forget, I've forgotten his name, but he was talking about fire. If you're interested, I can share with you guys at our Bend tour. Hate Bend, love the high desert. But what we did was we got a little mini tour with the Nature Conservancy and the group that did all the experimentation in the Sycan Marsh. That was basically skipped by the Bootlick Fire because they managed it in a very different way, and we have a lot of indigenous teachings. And they've done pithing of trees from 1411, and they can show the fire rings that how the Jen was describing. And they now have data, like the actual Western data that shows that forests were continuously managed from fire for as long as they can date. And then come about 1920, it just stops, like it just severed a nerve. And so that's actually already existing. Now they're in Bend, so it's the shoot side. So they're 5 million acres, but it would apply to the Willamette side, like coming off the other side. But at least if we're beginning to get that data and demonstrate. And now, of course, our wildlife people are freaking out, like, you can't burn the forest, you know, because each time it does so much damage, they don't understand the concept of controlled burns and continuous burns. And the second burn isn't the big black one, like the first one. And so that's a bit back and forth. It's a bit of a mistie, this is what we're talking about today, but you mentioned it. And I just wanted to let you guys know there actually is data out there now that is starting to come forward. And if you guys are interested, because like I said, I went on that tour and got some of the handouts, and it's super cool stuff. So I'm getting started with today. I'm going to briefly tell you about me because so many people don't get like why doctors on a commission. And then we're going to talk about seeing like what environmental justice is and what I'm trying to bring to this space. Hopefully this works. No, not working. Do I have to, like, maybe I can just say next slide?
Oh, really nailing it today.
Next slide works. Yep.
Okay.
Is next slide going?
No.
No, it's not working. Arrow keyword for you.
There we go. Yeah. So the 757, that's not an airplane. That is the area code of where I'm from. Okay. World's largest naval base. This should work. Yes. So they come in, these are the big aircraft carriers. It takes them a mile to stop. So they come in under the tugs. All right. So these are all the sailors in their dress white saluting out there. These are the jets, they line up. There's helicopters flying around. This whole big city when the carriers come in. Okay, but the point is that this is the biggest naval base in the world, head of the Atlantic Fleet, where I grew up. Okay, Chesapeake Bay. It's the largest bay in the lower 48. And probably the most polluted because it's got a 7-state runoff, including things like all of New Jersey, the Susquehanna and 3 Mile Island. Gosh, I was just thinking of the Delaware River where DuPont Chemical sits, and they built the Delaware Memorial big enough for these guys to fit through, and DuPont just dumps whatever into the river, which comes into the bay. Okay, and the key thing about this is the fire jets here. When they catch on fire, they're like a flare. but they have to burn out. So when something happens on these ships, they just kick it. So that just gives you an idea of the degradation that just the military has done to the bay and the ocean. Oh, sorry, that actually did work. This is that's a dry dock coming, so this is a big boomer sub. So along with the naval base, there's the shipyards. There's 3 big ones. I think that's Norfolk Naval, but there's Newport Naval, Portsmouth Naval. Dry dock's big enough for a submarine. And I remember my granddad would tell me stories like the asbestos was just visible. It would just get everywhere. Everything's coal fired. Who knows what they were coated in. Just really, really toxic spaces. And all this is about to be below sea level because the whole area is basically reclaimed wetlands. The whole southeastern United States was a swamp. Used to catch malaria there. Okay, so all of this is about to be in some serious trouble. This is Norfolk and Southern. That Norfolk and Southern that had the ultimate redneck moment where, you know, hold my beer in terms of a train derailed full of chemicals, so then they lit it on fire. That didn't surprise me at all because the reason we have time zones is because of the railways. Like, I mean, you know, for me growing up, when the house started to shake, that's when you knew you had to go to bed. That was our alarm clock. And what the trains were these coal trains. And I've never in my life ever seen a covered coal train. And so the coal dust is just flying, the coal is flying off. We used to collect this stuff off the railroad tracks when we were kids and make little fires. So like you can imagine, like between the military degrading the place, between Norfolk and Southern, and they're carrying on, between all the things going wrong, like, you know, I remember there would be storms and just creosote would just be in the yard, be out there barefoot, just picking it up. It was just everywhere. So that's kind of why I explained my story, is because when we think about environmental justice, we need to think about where people live. That's really what it's all about. And most people recreate within 1 to 5 miles of where they live. So if you live in a toxic spot that's full of creosote, well, guess what? That's where you recreate. And that's just basically my story and the story of most BIPOC marginalized poor people. Okay. Now, just so that's not all bad, the vibe, Virginia Beach, okay? That's also one of the cities that are there. And there is a beautiful Atlantic. This is the Atlantic in terms of no more salmon over there, but still a beautiful ocean. Because it's where the Chesapeake Bay dumps into the ocean. Okay, so this is the ocean part. All right, and for all of you that don't know, Virginia Beach, this is their seal, is the birth of skateboard. Okay, and so when I was a kid, there was a dump at the edge of the city. So Virginia Beach was Virginia's beach. And because it was out the wild out countryside, at the edge of Norfolk, where I grew up, there was a dump. And there were all sorts of great big old sewer pipes sticking out of it. And I remember skating through them, like with good old fashioned roller skates, the old metal wheels ones. All right, and so what an ingenious person did one day is they took the 4 wheels of a skate and nailed them to a board. They took the top half of a sewer pipe and made half a pipe. So Mount Trashmore, a mountain of trash, became the birthplace for the sport that we now call skateboard. All right, and that was literally, on Virginia Beach Boulevard, on the way to the beach from my house, okay? These are some of the famous. So Pharrell, this guy, notice he's got a skateboard because he went to Princess Anne High School, which is just off view of that last picture. So when you hear about him being a little skateboard bee, that's why. This is Timothy Timberland Mosley. He grew up in Carney Park, which is the initial picture where I'm standing there as a kid, like holding a little ball. That was a housing project that has now been torn down. It was built as temporary GI housing quarters. It became permanent for poor people. And that is where he and I both grew up. And that's in their songs as well. Once Upon a Time in Carney Park. That's in both. This is his main partner in crime. One of the newest inductees to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Missy Elliott. This is one of the famous Gabbies. This is Gabby Edwards. My grandma knows her grandma, sort of thing. And the reason she's significant is The US women's gymnastics team was the only team to win back-to-back gold medals. She was the only person on both teams. So that's why she's one of the famous Gabbies. This guy, you know, I put him in, you gotta put in the token white guy, yeah. No, I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. Honestly, Patrick Wilson is from Norfolk. But his story is very similar to so many people in the military there, like he was probably born there, the parents somehow affiliated with the military, and before he even remembered, they moved and grew up somewhere else. So that is a really typical story of the area. Like, oftentimes I get people like, I was there for the Coast Guard, or, you know, there's always some kind of on and going, so this is a very typical story, Patrick Wilson's story, okay? Yeah, so this one is in Charlottesville, Virginia, so this is where I went to medical school, all this stuff back here. Mr. Jefferson's University. This statue's now gone, but this was at a big, what's called the corner. And the third president launched the Corps of Discovery, right? Captain, Meriwether Lewis, Lieutenant William Clark, would have ended up fish food out there if it weren't for, I can't even say her name right, is it Sacagawea? Sacagawea, I don't know if we even say it right. But and her story is amazing. I mean, like she went there and back again while pregnant with a baby, with a toddler. She was the translator. She was everything. She was the reason that was a success. And they portrayed her like that. So thankfully that story, this has been torn down because people protested, people were covered up, people were painted, they did everything to it. They're like, get rid of that thing. And so, but it's important to note that like, it occurred to me, like, I'm from one end of the Oregon Trail and I ended up at the other. And so I took the picture at the Iredale, but I saw one of the times I was at the coast, there's a different Lewis and Clark statue. It's this side at the roundabout. And I thought, I think I've seen this before. And then I realized that, yes, actually I had, because of, you know, again, where I'm from, the Virginia roots, and that Virginia history. This brings us finally to ODFW. So that's Acuvia, the pictures that I just showed you where the statue was, me and my old pop. That is a nice, ungulate, shall we say. During my bow hunting days, my knee is probably too bad to pull that off now. These two is what I was doing immediately prior to coming here. So I was a doctor with the Royal Flying Doctor Service. And we did all COVID all the time, as you might imagine. But before that, we did this, which is the Continental Fire. So you guys got COVID and then the fires, we got it in reverse. We got Black Summer. And we were still a smoking ember. We were flying around fires when COVID hit. So we were kind of already on lockdown and then it just kind of got worse. So Black Summer, remember it's backwards. So just to show you, this is kind of what was happening. And this was, you know, as I described to everyone, Santa brought scorched earth. So the people were just kind of trying to go to grandma's house for their Christmas. And people got stuck and caught out, and it was because there was nowhere to go because literally the whole continent was on fire. And they did all these things to superimpose the USA on Aussie because the USA is bigger than the lower 48. I'm sorry, Aussie's bigger than the lower 48 in terms of the landmass. And so that's what really made it sink in. Like imagine the whole of the country's on fire, and that's what we were dealing with in Australia at the time. And so there were a lot of transports we couldn't do because we couldn't fly through the ash. I mean, it was just a hot, hot mess. And this is kind of the classic picture that was in the New York Times of everything on fire and the kangaroo hopping around. Whereas from our point of view, this was actually much more real because you can see the fire all around this lady. She got the ready, set, go. And so she was flying down the road and she saw a koala. And it was squealing and trying to get away. And like they live in the eucalyptus trees. And she stopped and ran and got it. And she literally, there's footage of this, is just a picture. When she tried to pick it up, like she dropped it like a hot potato because it was still smoking because it had just gotten out of the tree and was trying to run. And they can't run very fast. I mean, the roos had a chance. Well, it's not so much. So what she did, she took off her shirt and she's got her shirt wrapped around it and ran to her truck, dumped a bucket over it, put it in a laundry basket and kept on flying because this was happening. You know, this was probably about to look like that because eucalyptus trees, they're super cool, but they're full of sap. So they literally explode. And they explode with the koalas in them. Which is why this is what happened to most of the koalas. They are now endangered. 40% of the New South Wales forest burned, just New South Wales. So just to give it the scale of what we were dealing with and what we were running from, and then we got all locked up. So it was bad. So I feel for you guys when you were having your opposite, like I was just like, yeah, I get that. And this is what people were dealing with. Like literally, they ran to the sea, like they saw and they heard the fire, pick up the children and run. Okay, and that's where they stayed until the Royal Australian Marines came and got them. Like Omaha Beach style, with the, whatever they're called, amphibious vehicles, whatever. I mean, that's where those people, they were there for days. No one could go and get them. It was that crazy. The fire was so intense, there was absolutely nowhere to go. And when I think about it now, because I remember we had to shut hospitals because even the hair filters couldn't clean up, they couldn't keep up, like patients were coated. I mean, it was just, you know, we had to close all the operating theaters, like it was just nuts. And it's one thing to run from a fire. It's quite another thing when you can't run from a fire. And that's what that was. And that was just really just otherworldly. I'm still kind of, even though I love the kind of concept of controlled burns, whenever I see that black smoke, I can't. Because I see that, all right? This is what I did to keep from losing my mind. Okay, so this is from about 2008. So I've written a bunch of op-eds before. Never really went anywhere. You know, I'd maybe get some replies, responses. Mostly I just did it for my own edification because I had my medical degree, but it was going for environmental stuff. And that was kind of a way to kind of exercise that part of my brain. So I started writing them probably a good 20 years ago. And this is one of the ones that came into my mind when I was sitting there trying to understand what was happening with this fire all around me. And I was thinking about climate refugees, which is what I was just about to be, frankly. And that's this, and I saw this and I thought, this is from 15 years ago. I could just sort of change the date and do the whole thing all over again. And I noticed that I kind of put a graphic in it. So that kind of inspired me to do this, which was, it was a way to pivot away from medicine, kind of do more of my environmental brain. And I went to this program. It was a Harvard program. It was during COVID, so it was all online, but it was about writing, essentially, about expression for healthcare professions. And both lovely people, like this guy's written for ER, she's like writer in residence for Mass General, all fancy. But what she said just struck a nerve with me. And she told me that what I need to write about is the fact that I'm hiding in plain sight. I was like, I'm not hiding. Just because you don't see me doesn't mean I'm hiding. And that was kind of when I started to sort of have this idea of what we're talking about today. And this was the op-ed that I wrote, where I am suddenly visible. That I've been overlooked and unseen. And why? Like, why don't you see me? Like, why do you think I'm hiding when I don't think I'm particularly subtle or quiet or any of those things? And that's where I got the idea for this. This is one of my original comics that I did for that course. The origin story for Dr. Invisible. I used my Aussie duster. And this is what the cover looks like. And using kind of the Native American wheel, like time as a circle, things like that, going with the seasons. That's kind of where I got some of these ideas and wrote a story. I can absolutely share it with you. I won't do it now because of time. But that was kind of, again, a way to kind of shift and move into where I am now. And this was a little bit later. At this point, I was a commissioner here. I was back here in Oregon, and I was trying to explain urban ecology to, I think, our deputy directors, because we were going to do a tour of Portland, and they just didn't get it. They didn't understand why we needed to do a tour and what it was all about. And so I wrote, again, an essay. I worked with an illustrator. And that paragraph became this page. So, and then what happened was, ahead of the Portland meeting, I passed out this comic to our executive leadership at OEFW. And suddenly the penny drops, everything clicked. They understood what I was saying and why this was important. And so that brings me to environmental justice. Just so that in case you don't know what it is, in case you never heard the definition, what I say over and over again, don't just look, but see. Just because something is hiding, just because you don't see something, doesn't mean it's hiding. it means you don't see it. That's a whole different thing. And so the official definition, this is as per the EPA in 94, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement, those are the key words, of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Now, the official definition is much, much longer than that, it's probably a page long, but what I did is I simplified it and just kind of edited it. That's kind of the basis of the foundation of environmental justice that has existed now for 30 years. But now suddenly it's about, again, why did we see it? It was always there, but it's not new. You know, again, just because you don't see something doesn't mean it's not there, doesn't mean it's hiding. All right. This is gonna be a graphic exercise, everyone. All right. I did not have the Hood River data to do, but this is systemic. So I could be talking about Milwaukee, Oregon, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It'd be the same, really. So I have the Portland data to show you, but know that this is universal. And if you understand the concept, you can see how it applies to this place, okay? So these are the 5 watersheds of Portland. To give you bearing, that's Ross Island, so that's south, right? That'll be on every map, always, always. So that's down the bottom, okay? The slough, and then the Willamette River watershed, these are up in the Superfund site, north, okay? The one that's doing really well is Johnson Creek. Okay, they get $5 million at a whack and have a lot of people working for them. They're always in the press, people giving them land. They're on a roll, okay? The west side, Tryon, way down off the screen, it's a little bit hard to see, but that's kind of Lake Oswego and that money set. Whereas just remember Fano, I'll come back to it at the end, because Fano's probably the closest to the river, and you'll see why in a bit. Okay, so remember the watersheds. And then I'm gonna show you on what I call the devil is in the deep blue dots, okay? The rich version of that. The deeper the blue, the worse you are, okay? Based on the areas of vulnerability. They put 4 variables. They put the low income, renter, people of color, low education. Those were the 4. And that's what made you this area of vulnerability, okay? Remember the slough, that's the top. Remember the Willamette in here. It's looking a little bit better down here. Johnson Creek is, because there's Ross Island, okay? This would be
That's for Tryon.
Tryon, I was gonna say not Fano, but Tryon. And then Fano would be right over here, okay? So remember the blue, remember the areas that are vulnerable, okay? The devil lives in the deep blue dots, always remember that. That's where the white people live. Now, if that looks completely opposite to you, that's because it is, all right? So the opposite of vulnerability, and these are the old money neighborhoods of Portland, Alameda Ridge, Selwood, Eastmoreland, where Reed College is, all this stuff down here, Woodstock. This would be Lake Oswego, Dunthorpe, all the fancy, because there's Ross Island, okay? This is 1927 data, because this came to us from Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and they did a whole big piece on zoning. And what they proved in basically 100 years, nothing has changed, okay? Because they did 1927 and put it on a current map. Where do the single dwelling, where are they located within in terms of home ownership? Where in the city of Portland? Alameda Ridge, Selwood, the Moorlands, Lake Oswego, okay? This is again 1927 data put on a modern map. So it hasn't changed. This is again racially concentrated areas of influence. Where do people, like, you know, in terms of the higher the percentage away from the median income? Alameda Ridge, the Eastmoreland, Westmoreland, Lake Oswego, Dunthorpe. Homeowners, okay, now this gives you a little bit of the opposite. This is red line. Okay, so again, based on zoning, what neighborhoods were considered hazardous to investment? That's what redlining was. Okay, you hear a lot about this neighborhood, Alabama. Okay, and then there's just some neighborhoods in the near end northeast that were also redlined, and then there's some this way on the west side. Okay, we'll get to those in just a second, but you can see what's not redlined. Alameda Ridge, East and Westmoreland. Look at Lake Oswego. okay? Those are considered best, right? Okay, so those weren't redlined. This is that original 27 map, so instead of the one superimposed on the modern map, showing you the same thing. And this one just is one last thing, showing you where the affluence is, who gets the mortgage interest reduction, and who owns their home, who's the tax breaks. Same neighborhoods, over and over and over again. Hopefully you guys see the pattern, you're all smart people. And that, if you remember that, is superimposed, remember the sloughs across the top, Lamb in the middle, Johnson Creek scooting along the bottom, okay? You guys got that? This is just one more just reminder, where's the racially concentrated areas of influence? That's what your neighborhood land looks like. Okay, that's Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden, which is in the southern part of the city. I can show you, I'll have a map again to show you again. That's Reed Canyon. Stunning. Private college did their own restoration. Again, southern area of the city, okay? And it showed you, so though that would be here, okay? Johnson Creek Watershed, okay? And this would be kind of Reed College, Sellwood, East and Westmoreland, and Woodstock. And that's what those neighborhoods, that's what their rivers, springs, etc. look like. So Crystal Springs goes into Johnson Creek, goes into Willamette, okay? In the southern part, because you can barely make it out, but there is Ross Island is on there somewhere. When you live across from that, here, I'll go back just to show you. Right here in these blue dots, where the devil starts to live, it used to be continuous down at Oak Grove. Milwaukee is gentrifying because so many people can't afford to live in that neighborhood I just showed you. So you're seeing a lot of people come across. And so, but there's still a lot of disparity, okay? And in those areas, their river looks like that. Okay, that's the Kellogg Dam. This is Highway 99. This is a highway that we drive across. All right, when you see through here, this is the pedestrian bridge that goes underneath the railroad bridge. Okay, this is a dam that predates Lincoln, predates the Civil War, predates Oregon statehood. Okay, 1853 estimate. It was built by Kellogg to power a flour mill. Okay, and left there. Some 100 years later, ODFW came along and made this crappy thing, this ladder thing. I mean, it's got a whirlpool in it, it's awful. Like the fish that get through is when the water's high and they just shoot the gap. Okay, all right, so that just gives you a sense, and I think I put it here, like, okay, so if you live in the fancy part, you live here, this is what your watershed looks like. If you live down here in the blue dots, that's what your watershed looks like. And to me, that's what's significant is that, remember, most people recreate within 1 to 5 miles of where they live. So if they live in this toxic place, they never get to the glorious place. They never get that, ever. This is 3 miles difference, 3 miles. I actually clocked it in my car and you can look it up on Google Maps, okay? This just gives you a sense of what it's like in that impoundment past all that. This is some of the interfluve people. There's McKinsey. This is Amy, another. I've met quite a few mighty Watershed Councils of 2. This is one half of the North Clackamas Watershed Council, Amy and Neil. Okay, so she's the one taking the selfie in the middle of this mess. Bona here, I think he fell over or he got drowned, something happened. The scooter was there for a while. And what happened, some of the soil guys that were out there said, oh, it's got a battery, it's toxic, we gotta take it out. I'm just like, look at this water, does it matter? Like, I mean, there's like a grocery cart sticking up. When we were there, I didn't take pictures, but the full-on harmful algae bloom, like DEQ, like took the Sentinel satellites and aimed it at it and found a bloom. I mean, this is just, again, this is your neighborhood when you live in the blue dots, okay? This is a lake, quote unquote. Kellogg Lake. Now we're going to come into some typical watershed speak that we all say, right? Near total anatomy barrier. Now, you probably, I know I have some members of ODFW here, but I told some other members, like when I was down at headquarters, if I hear you say that word, and I'm in a presentation, I will walk to the front and smack you, because Nobody knows what that means. Okay, don't say that. Just say fish or salmon or springer or coho or something that somebody understands. And so, but that's what happens when we get in this typical watershed speak. The other one that kills me, 14.5 habitat acres. What does that even mean? If you said to me, acres a city block, that might make more sense. Or it's 4 football fields, like give me something. You know, and again, this is what I think, why people don't even know what this is or what to ask for. All right? Regional trail connections, they kind of get that. The 40-mile loop is now 120 miles of all the biking and the biking and pedestrian around Portland. Highway bridge improvements, they definitely get that, because like I said, this is an unimproved. I mean, it's not earthquake proof, and that's that we drive across that. There's a stoplight, there's a bus line, I mean, the whole thing. All right. And then people definitely understand the improved flood storage and control. And so this gives you a sense, okay, that's the terrible lake you saw. All right. And this is the habitat restoration they're talking about coming up this way. And then here in North Clackamas Park and Three Creeks, that's part of Clackamas Water and Environmental Services, but they got a grant from Metro to do a bunch of habitat and restoration so that when Kellogg is improved, this part will be improved too. And like I said, the few fish that get through that shoot that gap, they do make it all the way to Happy Valley. They do. So, and we know that the origin of Kellogg, way down here, like in the Clackamas called it Cold Creek. This is Cold Spring. So once we remove that dam, hopefully we'll get some cold water refusion. Okay. This is what I would like to start to hear in some of the speak that we're talking about with restoration, okay? Let's talk about strong community support. Let's talk about, do people know what this is? Let's talk about opportunities for community engagement. Again, explaining, like maybe explain management. Like maybe then you get some more people that just won't phase out on you when you say that word, okay? Let's start, it's an equity focus area. And the reason is, this is Milwaukee High School. This, okay? So it's literally right across. This is the railroad bridge. No, that's the highway. That's the highway here. This is highway, this is the Lake Road. So there's the Presbyterian Church, and this is kind of quote the lake all through here. This is the part that's going to be restored, that 14.5 acres, okay? So right through here, you can see how close the highway is to the school. And this is 50% BIPOC and 6% free or discounted lunch. It was higher before, again, it's starting to gentrify. All right, so these are some of the things that maybe we start to talk about, like why we should restore these places. We could also talk about Milwaukee Station. It's a really fun, we had lunch there. Every time we go, it's a food garden. It's right across from Milwaukee High School, it's got a beer garden. We could talk about the alumni. I think it's 2 guys, it's 2 or 3 of them that are alumni of Milwaukee High School that started Dark Horse Comics. Okay, so talk about the neighborhood and the community and the people. Not just the anadromous fish, I call it the neighborhood. Okay, now I finally come to you, okay? Remember, the devil's in the blue dots. When we talk about environmental justice, it's not just Portland, it's everywhere. And so it may not come through as clear, that's you guys. Your dot is bluer than Multnomah County. Okay, another one down here, the Sprague and the Sycan that I just mentioned about the fires. Another one out here in Ontario, the state and all that madness is happening. The Residence, Umatilla, there's Warm Springs, so there's blue dots all over the place, not just Portland. And that's one of the things that I really just beat the drum that, yes, I'm the commissioner of Portland. Yes, I talk about this all the time, but it's not just Portland. We need to kind of bring this into our conversations about so many areas. And this is where I hopefully come to you guys a little bit. So if you don't know what this is, this everyone calls it. It's Vanport, that's right, Oregon's Katrina, okay? It's surprising how many people don't know what that is. A lot of people don't. All right, happened in 48. So, and this is classically what you see. People in their Sunday best, carrying their trunks and the kitties. This guy was driving his car and literally leapt out and grabbed that boy who was floating away. So just like kind of Libya style, the levee broke. This is what happened. It was a big railroad burn that broke. Okay, this happened in 48. Vanport was built in 42. The flood happened in 48 after a big snow year and then the big rain year. And the only dam there was the Grandma Bonneville. Okay. Would have had a massive loss of life, like what you have in Libya. But because it was Memorial Day weekend on a Sunday, everybody was away. So it had all the structure that went away, but luckily the people weren't there. All right, and this is what you see usually after, a whole lot of black people huddled up in church, right? They're refugees now, have no home. And so they end up, now why not? See the shape of that red line district that I showed you? There it is, okay? So you socked all those people into one spot, redlined them, made it toxic, and trapped them there. That's what environmental justice is about, as opposed to like what you saw in Alameda Ridge, so in Eastmoreland, and Lake Oswego, okay? But what I wanna also talk about is this is right in, almost in view of Vanport. It built the same year, 1942, what we call the Portland Expo Center was the Portland Assembly Center. Okay? The Metro's about to build a plaque about this one, because this is where all of the Japanese were herded up and sent to. That's what this was built for in 42. And this gives you a sense of how close they are. They're only a mile apart. So there's Vanport, there's the Expo Center. So kind of everybody being herded up into these places for different reasons, but same year, all the same. Okay. This is the people that didn't go to the containment center, meaning it's the only picture I could find from the Hood River Historical Museum. This was the Train of Tears, okay, where instead of sending people to the Expo Center and then away, they just used the train. The train that the Issei built was used to ship their Nisei and Sansei grandchildren away, okay, 42. And it's the little tourist attraction, you can do the little paddle down the railroad, that's what this is, okay? And so again, instead of shipping people off, what they did, if you're in Portland or nearby, like they were either Portland or Koala, and the Northwest people went either to the lake, Minidoka, or Hardon, okay? The river people went straight to the lake, they just used the train, okay? And that's where they went. This one is Tule Lake, it's now in the historic registry because it was the biggest. And there's all the plaques and the stuff and explaining what happened. And this is, you know, they had coal stoves, it was like paper thin, you know, very cold, very just ridiculous conditions, okay? For no reason at all, because of the paranoia. This is what happened when they tried to come home. This is Hood River. Okay, this explains a lot of that blue dot. Okay, so you gotta think these people were shipped off in exile, tried to come back again and couldn't. And then they ended up at Vanport. These are the pictures of Vanport. Like you always see Vanport classically, a whole lot of black people huddled in church. But when you see pretty Vanport before the flood, you start to see a much more multicultural picture. And you start to see all the little faces. They're there. You see them? You look right at it. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at these pictures and didn't see them. Look at these pictures. I mean, again, pre-flood. So these are people that went back and forth, you know, trying to come back home again, couldn't get back home, ended up working in Vanport. And then they got flooded. This is a river, you guys all know Man, handsome devil. Man was in Portland. He was the first Japanese member of the Oregon Bar, so a citizen from here, tried to stand up for his fellow citizens. For his trouble, he was slapped in Multnomah County Jail. For 9 months, he stayed in a single cell. And because he was in Portland, he got sent to Minidoka. Whereas his family got sent to Tule. All right, they eventually linked back up in Colorado, but then never came home again, except ashes and, you know, to be God's parents and whatnot. Okay, that's his medal. That was accepted by his granddaughter, I think, on his behalf, given by President Obama nearly 30 years after he died. Okay, and this we now know Highway 35. All of this helps explain that blue dot. What else happened in 42? Well, you just shipped off all your Japanese worker people. All the fighting men are in the selective service, drafted to go and fight in a foreign war. So what's the American way when you need labor? Import it, right? This was also 42. All right. executive order, a different one, that eventually came law by Congress. This is the Mexican Migrant Farm Workers Act. Started in 42, ended in 64. These are the Vaqueros, am I saying it right? Razo's arm?
Brazeros.
Brazeros, Razo's arm in Spanish. These are the worker bees. All men. I think I've got another great picture of them. Yeah, look at the brown boys. Look at some of them smile, huh? So they were here on contract labor, 6 to 12 months at a time. 42, that's almost 80 years ago. That means we're talking third, even fourth generation, people that are here now. There's another big importation in the 90s for a whole different reason. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is the way they were treated. Where they went to is where the Nisei and the Issei left. Like, so they went to the same neighborhoods, like they were shipped off to Odell or wherever, and not allowed to own their land, not allowed to get jobs besides manual labor, et cetera, and that still largely exists to this day. Of course, it's changing, but understanding this, understanding what happened to the Issei, Nisei, and beyond, helps understand the intensity of that blue dot and why Hood River has just as much disparity as all the other places all around it, okay? That this is not just an urban problem, it's not just Portland. And that's kind of, pretty sure this is my last slide, because what I always say, and what I always try to convey with this is, don't just look. See. Your answers are right there. They're right there. Where are the projects? I always get that question from our ODFW executive leadership, the people that are really doing a lot of instrumental things to get these grants that you guys have talked about in your updates. They're like, we know the grants. We don't know the projects. Yes, you do. They're in these dots. If you look there, you will see them, because disparity in many ways, it's code. It's like, put whatever you want in front of it. Income disparity, health disparity, access to fresh food disparity. I mean, like, you can just keep layering on the disparity. And that is what determines the disparity in the environment. So again, the poor people live amongst the coal dust and the creosote. Rich people live in a place like Crystal Springs. It's obvious, but do we see it? We live in such a siloed world where we don't see each other. We're so racially segregated. COVID made all of that worse. But like what I've always said is, like, you don't have to look very far for projects. They're right there. If you just look for them, you see them. And so that is why we've done a lot here. Hopefully, we'll know soon whether you've been successful getting some grants to the river with all those pictures you're talking about, because what I saw as a commissioner was that. I'm like, there's gotta be projects there. There's gotta be. There's no way there's not. How are they just hiding in plain sight? No, they're not. If you go out there, you'll see them. I know you ladies know, you know where they are, the board knows, but I think it's about making that larger awareness and that larger connection. And that's what I hope environmental justice does, and like just looking at things from more of an equity focus. And that is my last slide.
Anyone?
Yes.
I think one of your themes is that migrations due to disasters is unequal, racially divided in other ways. I think with climate change, obviously that's already happening in many places, and will probably happen here. I think a lot of people don't want to face that reality in both ways, both of the need to migrate for that reason and for the disparity in those migration patterns.
Yeah.
What do you suggest to overcome that resistance to accepting those ideas?
Well, you know, what I say to people all the time, you know, nobody picks their mom of the day, or the two grandmas, or the two granddads, or raised by their auntie, or whatever situation. Nobody picks it. We're all born into this mess, right? So learning about the past, I think, is important because it informs the present. It answers the how did we get here question, like how did that blue Hood River dot did here? Why is that a thing? Like, we're watching kite orders and like all of this money that seems to be dripping from the trees, like what's going on here? It answers that question. But to me, what's more important with that is by facing that, it allows you to shape a more equitable future because you're looking at it clear-eyed, not with a lot of hate and blame and carrying on, but with understanding, with facts, with that, I want to say, cultural backdrop and understanding, like, everybody inherited their own mess. So like, I always think of my grandmother, like, remember when you go like this, there's at least 3 fingers going right back at you, okay? Like, everyone has feet made of clay. So to me, it's about understanding and it's about moving forward into a more equitable future. And that, everybody absorbs as much as that as they want. Like, people really want to do a deep dive into the past and really get into the nitty-gritty, but other people want just enough and say, okay, that was bad. I'm not that person, I'm gonna pivot and do something else. So I think it's individual, but I think also we need to arm people with the facts. Like, so many people, like, my commission didn't know what Vanport was. Okay? Like, my commission didn't understand urban ecology. So some of these things that I always have to like really continuously explain, and I'm happy to do. I think we need to, why is it so siloed? Why are people hiding in plain sight? Why don't you see it? What is it? What's the barrier to your seeing? And one of the things that I said to one of my deputy directors, who was really resistant to this in the beginning, I said, Deb, I'm not trying to burst your bubble. I'm trying to get you to see the bubble. Okay? Like, it's your bubble. It's your personal property. You get to do what you want. You can install windows, doors, okay? Do whatever. But it's yours. If I come along and I burst it, well, you're mad at me. Like, I've destroyed your property. And so I'm not trying to create that rage. I'm just trying to get you to see it. And then you can make your own action. Big or little, but it's yours. And so that's kind of what I try to approach people with, is with knowledge and understanding, and not just hollering and screaming at each other and hate and accusations. That gets us nowhere. So, and I think so much of it is, again, we've got to get out of those siloed minds that we're in. That hopefully I've answered. That's what it is for me. Okay, this time? Sorry.
No.
Okay. Have I shell shocked you all? I went through a lot really fast. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I know, I for one, yeah,
Processing.
processing,
Yeah.
even though we've talked about this with you, we've had the privilege of being able to have conversations, Alex and I, with you over the past several weeks, and this is really good.
I guess in this space, and it feels like we have focused upstream, we focus more on anatomy.
Yeah. That worked.
You're gonna get snapped.
We focus on habitat, but I can't remember us ever looking at like Odell, there's stretches of creek is pretty degraded area.
And that's something Cindy and I have talked about, and Cindy and Alex and I, exactly. And I think once you start to look at the people, I think, I had this battle that like I'm having in reverse now. When I was a doctor, we never talked about the environment. And I was always so frustrated. I was just like, if we have someone with life-threatening asthma, so bad they're in ICU, if we send them back home to that polluted neighborhood, guess what? They're gonna come back with life-threatening asthma. Like, we've got to fix this. This is a loop. We've got to break it. And I always just got, oh, well, you're just a doctor, do your job. Like, there's always this myopia, treat the patient. In the environmental space, it's just the opposite. It's always about anatomy and fish and all these things, and like the lamprey and gamma seeds in the water or whatever they're doing out there in the soil for 7 years. And I'm just like, you know what? The people that live here would really benefit from trees and urban canopy. It's like, it's completely opposite. Like, there's no talk about people. And I'm just like, people, the people are in nature. That's what urban ecology is. That's what so much of this is. Like, let's talk about the people and the benefits to people. And that's why that Kellogg Dam project is so huge and why it's such a big deal. I think it got the biggest NOAA grant ever at 15 million. And there's people that are still pissed at NOAA for giving them that much money. And it just but again, it's about the focus of the people. Look at where it is. I mean, literally all that stuff I showed you is in like 3 blocks. You walk a little circuit. And there's a high school, as I showed you, there's the food trucks, there's a railroad tracks, there's a light rail, there's a highway, there's a church, like there's all of these things that are people. And look at, they're gonna benefit from all of that open up green space. That's gonna completely change their entire environment. It's gonna, like when you're standing there now, it is absolutely a heat island, but you can't stand there. It's loud, it's hot, like just, like you're just like, run, like jump in the river, do something. But I think that's where we need to kind of start to flip, is like reintroducing, like we've separated people from the environment. And I think that that is wrong. I think we need to realize we are a part of it, and especially in current times, we are impacting it in a huge, huge way. So like, we need to own that and kind of come together on that. And that's how you bring things like Odell into the frame. It's like when you start to look at people and whose environment is the most degraded and who's been the most ignored. And do those people even know what river restoration is? Do they even know to ask for it? Do they know it's a thing? Do they have that skill set? Do they have the knowledge base? Or have they always been so marginalized? They've never even gotten that point of view, that perspective. I can tell you, like, again, where I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, is no different than Albina and Portland. This is systemic, you know, pick your city and you can find the same thing. So I think once we kind of like, we realize that this is countrywide, if you will, I think we can kind of begin to start to have just those kind of conversations like, holy crap, we ignored this entire area because we've been so hyper-focused on this, like we missed all of that. And it's always been right there. It's never been hidden. You just didn't see it. So that's what I mean, it's about training your gaze. For me, anyway, because I mean, my own personal experience, like looking at those pictures of Vanport, I never saw those Japanese faces, never. You know, and it just shocked myself. I'm just like, you know, because you're so hyper focused on this is the story of Black people in Portland, and this is how they, like, this is a drumbeat, you know, and it's like, hold on. What I realized is that you're always showing the pictures after, because everything was still segregated. So that's all you ever saw was people in their segregated little pods, which is what we see now. But when you saw it before in that multicultural environment, it's just sort of like, holy crap, we weren't the only ones there. I mean, it just was that whole new awareness, you know, again, what do you see? It was always right there. Those pictures have always been a part of the historical society, blank, blank, blank. You know, I found them all just doing a Google search. They're everywhere. Never saw them.
So Leslie's, we're working on some specific fundraising, but Leslie has started, with some initial funding to help us with storytelling. And, one of the things that we talked about, for the end of this talk was just, you know, getting your thoughts on, the topic, but also storytelling and being, you know, sort of engaging our full community in a, you know, more fully, doing a better job of that as a watershed group. So this is an opportunity to, you know, share, you know, give, you know, as Leslie's helping to, you know, is basically crafting story, and some of the graphic, it's not a graphic novel, but it'll be a comic essentially of the watershed. So any thoughts? Maybe you don't have them right now.
Yeah, I'm saying, you know, it's late,
a lot to
people are
digest.
tired. And you know, you can find me, you know, Alex and Cindy can find me, and I know Chuck and I were hopefully gonna go see some stuff, actually, not by Odell, but down Parkdale Way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so gonna go see some of those earthen canals.
Eastward intake and how it changed, with the improvements.
I brought some pictures for Leslie.
Oh, great.
Pre-construction, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but, I told her I'd take her up there and I was gonna ask you if you wanted to, come on too.
But I mean, I think that to me is a perfect example, is like, that still has earthen canals, that's just plain crazy. Like, I mean, but again, it's like, look at where you were focused, like, look at what you didn't see. But, you know, here we are in 2023 with earthen canals, like, to me, I always hated those things, because I worked in Madras and Jefferson County a lot, and they've got big ones, and people always would follow those things and drown, and I hate it too. And they turn off the pumps and the bodies would come up, it's just, yeah. Like I've just been the devil to me. So like when you said canals, I was like, no. You know, there's such a better way now. But again, if that's not your focus, if that's not what you see, because you're so worried about, you know what, the fish counts and the whatever. But you forgot all about the people. And so, to me, I just think that there could be balance. I just think that there could be, I just firmly believe we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I state that, I say that to all of, like, when we're talking about budget talks, because it's always a war, it's always a fight about like, well, if we pay for this, we can't pay for that and all that. And I'm always just like, you know what? We need to change the preposition. It's not an or, it's an and. We have a big enough tent, we can figure this out. We just need to just sit and think. And and stop with this knee jerk of like thinking we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's not a zero-sum game, that is a zero-sum trap. And I'm sick of that trap. That pits people against each other. We just need to get in a whole different headspace. So, and like I'm not against all the lovely fish ladders and all the things that are going on. I'm an ODFW. It's grand. But I think that there's so much other that we can do. And in many ways, I'd like to say I'm bringing people with me, because one of the things we've talked about, say with Indian Creek, and they clicked in, they're like, that could be a wildlife crossing, that could be community green space, we could plant trees. It's sort of like, hallelujah. We're not just talking about, you know what? And one of the reasons it was such a battle and such a struggle to get that funded is because for forever, we couldn't find the mitigation sites. Why? No anadromous fish. It's like, that's, and if you look at the slough, and if you look at like some of the, I forgot to show you, but Fano, the one, the west side, the extreme west side of Portland, same thing. Both of those areas don't have anadromous fish, so they get completely ignored.
And that way they have the sewage overflows.
As I said, they've got sewage, they've got every kind of pesticide, they've got everything. They're Superfund sites. I mean, they get an F grade by the Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. Okay? We have no focus. Don't care that much about the Tualatin. Why? The ape bird. So and that's kind of and so that's what I'm like I said, hopefully I'm having some impact. And we started talking about spotted frogs, which is fantastic. Especially when again we were at Bend, but one of the reservoirs that's drying up is like the last spot where they are. So can we talk about that? Like that's a big deal. So those sorts of things. So here's hoping, and here's hoping having talks like this to groups like this. I've been invited now to Upper Nehalem, is that one? The Catacombs, another one. So the stuff out west, because some of the people that are in I call it the big environmental justice course, have kind of like gone off into their networks and worlds and want talks like this, which is great that people are open and willing to hear it and want to learn more. And I would say with stuff like this, like you don't get it all at once. You gotta, like for me, I've stared at those slides a lot. And I go through this a lot, and there's still something I always add and tweak to a presentation, like, oh, I could show this, there's still so much,
Well, something that comes to mind, having grown up here and spending most of my life here. And I could play Captain Obvious in your comic book here. But the Hood River Corridor, which is relatively recently, was donated by Pacific Corps, which had a hydro project, and now we have 400 acres. Runs right through the middle of an urban area, which has had tremendous opportunity, like at the River Mile 1 ponds. I mean, I grew up on those ponds, hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna happen within my
so.
lifetime, but that's a perfect opportunity right there.
Well, that would be part of the whole, I guess, Indian Creek and just kind of keep going.
Indian Creek's on the opposite side
Right,
of
yeah,
the
but
river.
it would just keep going. It'd be one whole long corridor, at least as I've seen it on the map.
Yeah.
I think I'm saying the same thing you are, but yes, that is something that again. So the way the funding worked and IIJ and all of it that's happening, it's all about dams and bridges and culverts. And that's because that's the way the funding came down with the infrastructure and jobs stuff. But what all of those guys figured out, and it came down through fish division, and of the budget, ODFW is $500 million. Half of that is fish division. So they have the biggest teams, the biggest budgets, the biggest everything, so we just turn them loose to go and get the money. They quickly figured out how to phone their friends. They quickly figured out, like, this could be habitat restoration, and this could be like, so the hope is that it's not just that narrow-minded, like, we got a place for this culvert. It's about, wow, this is right next to the middle school. And hey, they just donated this land, and this could be a whole corridor for people on walks, for the muleys that are getting nailed on the highway, like whatever it is. So, so yes, that is the hope, is that we bring some of that bigger, broader thinking into it. That's the hope. And we'll see, you know, like right now, it's like run for the gate for the money, because you have to do this all in 5 years. But that's the hope.
Are there any questions from folks online?
This is Yuan. I turn on my camera. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk a little bit. So first, I would like to appreciate Dr. Keen's presentation. It's great. I learned a lot from, you know, like history and, you know, what is happening. The EJ consideration here, we are getting more and more. And so I'm coming here was because one of my colleagues actually attended Dr. King's presentation, or I think it's the training at PSU. And so my colleague bring in your cases, for example, like the colleague Craig into our discussion. And we, as the HAPS group, and we immediately jump into this topic and would like to, you know, look at the information data, including the satellite data. So that was our discussion over there. And when Dr. King is showing all those maps, I feel like that's touching for what I am really interested about, the data analysis. So it's not only a map. Instead, we are putting the layers of different data to making the maps. It's giving a very detailed stories. So now we're really showing, you know, like where people are living, how our habitat in the different levels they're restored or not. And I just feel like this is very important, and we continue working on it. One example that from my work to support the harmful algae bloom projects, it's related to the satellite data. So we currently developing the tools to use EPA's satellite data. In order to use the satellite data, we actually will be very effective to look over the state and see the status of, you know, the water bodies, water quality. There is no bias. So I feel like that's just a great tools that we're using. At this point, EPA provided satellite data are still just focused on the large water bodies. But the next step, we were considering to even consider the smaller water bodies, streams, and that will make this data share to people in, how do I say that? Just no bias, more public view for people to look at it. So that's just a little bit comment here. Yeah, it's great presentation. Thank you. And thanks for the Hood River community have this meeting.
Yeah, like I said, that I just taught the course that I guess she had a colleague in. And again, the tentacles of this has already gone out. Like what you saw is really simple, really rudimentary. Me and my really simple skills and talking to the fish boys about creating the GIS map. It really is next level in terms of like how you can use GIS as narrative and storytelling and so much depth and layering. And like it's peeling back an onion, there's so much you can see. And in many ways, like I hope as I'm giving this talk, I meet people who can do that, because I can't. That stuff is amazingly cool, because that gets to what you talked about, like how do you get past all this screeching and like confrontation and people who don't want to face it? In many ways, you kind of just make it data. You know, just story map, just tell it that way, and it kind of diffuses it, you know, in many ways. It disarms it, and it gives, to me, it gives an important visual. Because I learned kind of over the course of all my studies, I'm much more of a visual learner. Like when you just throw a tome at me, like what happens for commission meetings, I'm just like, oh. But when you give me something that I can look at and interact with a little bit better, that tells a whole different story. It's so much more powerful. And now, like when I say now, when I talk about the devil in the deep blue dots, like you guys don't know what that is. Whereas if I wrote it, or like, you know, or maybe it was in a PowerPoint, maybe not so much. You know, so I mean, I really believe in the power of that and the people who have that skill set. Like, but I think it's more about, at this stage, getting those people to see what I see. Like, you know, those people tend to be data drones, and like they, you know, they're not looking at it with any kind of like depth or culture, or looking at, again, they're not looking at the people. So, but I thought it was amazing, like literally within a day of my course being done, I think it must have been John's team. They were at Oregon DEQ, they were directing Sentinel satellites and showing me algal blooms, and they're like, we know there's not people in there, but interfluence going in there, and they need to know. And like all this stuff was happening, I was just like, holy crap, and I think it just gives the power of that what, we have so much information at our fingertips, we need to start to share and kind of get more of a cooperation into it, and not just so confrontational, get more of that understanding. That's what I like anyway, and I've looked, you need to go.
I have to be at the pharmacy before I leave.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to leave, but thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
So,
Anyone else, anywhere?
anywhere.
Online or in the room?
Thank you so much, Leslie.
You're welcome, and you
Yeah.
guys can have that, I think you can probably already saved it, Alex.
Yep.
And I sent you my syllabus for my course, I share that all around because I'm about to now start teaching, I call it the big course, the at PSU, the undergrad and grad course for environmental justice as well. So there's gonna be a whole lot more hopefully happening. And hopefully a whole lot more good news for you guys in terms of like, you know, I beat to death these blue dots to get